the Seanchan Empire, the return of a lost people, and the enslaved Damane. Good evening and welcome to another episode of our Sleep to Lore series, where we dive deep into the history and mythology of your favorite fictional worlds to help you relax and drift off. Tonight we will talk about the Seanchan Empire from the Wheel of Time. This is a topic that covers a massive amount of history and culture involving a rigid empire that spans an entire continent across the ocean. We will explore how they came to be and how they returned to the main lands of the story. If you enjoy these deep dives into lore, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video, as it really helps us grow. Before we begin, I have a question for you to answer in the comments section below. If you discovered you had a dangerous power that could destroy a city, but also save lives, would you choose to use it or would you suppress it to keep everyone safe? Let me know what you think down below. Now let us close our eyes and cross the ocean to the land of the Seanchan. Chapter 1. The Consolidation. To understand the Seanchan Empire, we must first look back at the history of the Westlands. The story of the Seanchan does not begin on the continent that bears their name, but rather in the court of the most famous king in history. That king was Artur Paendrag, who was known to the world as Artur Hawkwing. Hawkwing was a ruler of unparalleled strength and ambition. During his reign, he did something no other ruler had ever managed to do. He united all the nations of the Westlands under a single banner. From the Blight in the north to the Sea of Storms in the south, and from the spine of the world in the east to the Aryth Ocean in the west, everyone bowed to the High King. However, peace was not enough for a man like Hawkwing. He was a conqueror at heart, and when there were no more lands left to conquer on his own continent, his eyes turned toward the horizons. He looked at the maps and saw only water, but he believed that there must be more land out there waiting for his rule. In the final years of his reign, he organized two massive military expeditions. One fleet was sent across the Isle Waste to the land of Shara, but that is a story for another time. The second fleet was even larger. This fleet was destined to sail west across the vast and treacherous Aryth Ocean. The command of this western fleet was given to his son, Luthair Paendrag. Luthair was a man much like his father. He was tall and strong and possessed a brilliant military mind. He carried with him the ideals of his father, which were justice and order and the belief that the common people should be protected. But he also carried the intense hatred of Aes Sedai that had plagued the later years of Hawkwing's life. The fleet that launched into the Western Ocean was massive. It carried hundreds of thousands of soldiers and sailors and craftsmen and their families. It was not just a raiding party, it was a migration. They intended to find new land and claim it for the High King. For a long time, the people of the Westlands believed that Luthair and his fleet were simply lost at sea. The Aryth Ocean is vast and dangerous. Storms there can swallow entire ships whole. Communications in those days were limited, and once the ships vanished over the horizon, they were gone from the pages of history in the Westlands. But they did not sink. They survived the journey. After many hard weeks at sea, battling waves that were like moving mountains, the lookouts on the lead ships spotted land. This was the continent that would eventually be known as Seanchan. But when Luthair and his forces arrived, they did not find an empty paradise waiting for them. They found a nightmare. The continent was in a state of absolute chaos. It was roughly the same size as the Westlands, but it was divided into dozens upon dozens of tiny nations. These nations were locked in a state of perpetual war. There was no High King here. There was no law that spanned the continent. There was only strength and blood. The most terrifying aspect of this new land was the people who held power. In the Westlands, the Aes Sedai were gathered in the White Tower. They were bound by the 3 oaths, which prevented them from using the one power as a weapon of war. But on this new continent, there was no White Tower. There were no 3 oaths. The women who could channel the one power here were warlords. They called themselves Aes Sedai, but they had nothing in common with the sisters in Tar Valon. These native channelers used the power freely to kill and conquer. They set themselves up as rulers of small territories. They constantly fought one another for dominance. They used the one power to blast apart armies and burn cities. The common people of this continent lived in absolute terror. They were nothing more than pawns in the games of these sorceresses. Luthair and his army walked right into the middle of this grinder. At first, the armies of Luthair were successful because they were disciplined. They were the soldiers of Artur Hawkwing. They knew how to fight in formation, and they knew how to use strategy. The native armies they faced were disorganized mobs. Luthair was able to establish a foothold on the coast. He began to conquer the local nations one by one, but as he pushed deeper inland, the resistance became much harder. The native Aes Sedai began to band together to fight this foreign invader. Luthair also faced a threat that did not exist in the Westlands in the same way. The continent was infested with shadow spawn. Trollocs and Murdral and other creatures of the Dark One roamed the lands. But there were also other beasts, strange and terrifying monsters that the Westlanders had never seen before. There were lizards that could fly called Raken. There were 3-eyed beasts that looked like a mix between a bear and a frog called Grolm. The native Aes Sedai had learned to control these beasts. They used them as shock troops. Imagine the terror of Luthair's soldiers. They were used to fighting men and maybe the occasional Trolloc in the borderlands. Now they were facing women who could throw lightning from the sky and who commanded monsters that could rip a horse in half. The campaign began to stall. Luthair was a brilliant general, but he could not fight magic with just swords and arrows. He needed a weapon. That weapon came to him from a source he did not expect. One of the native Aes Sedai named Damane defected to Luthair's side. Damane was a woman of great ambition, but she had many enemies among her own kind. She saw that Luthair had a powerful army, and she thought she could use him to get revenge on her rivals. She came to Luthair with a proposal. She told him that she knew a way to control the women who channeled. Damane was a maker of things. In the Westlands, she would have been called a genius with Ter Angreal. She had designed a device. It consisted of 2 parts. One part was a collar made of a silvery metal. The other part was a bracelet of the same metal. She explained to Luthair that if the collar was placed around the neck of a woman who could channel, and the bracelet was worn by another woman, the woman wearing the bracelet would have complete control over the one wearing the collar. Luthair was skeptical at first. He hated Aes Sedai. He did not trust this woman Damane, but he was desperate. His armies were bleeding. He agreed to let her demonstrate. Damane produced the first of these devices. They captured a native channeler during a skirmish. They placed the collar around her neck. Damane put the bracelet on her own wrist. The result was immediate and terrifying. The captured woman could not touch the source unless Damane allowed it. If Damane felt pain, the captured woman felt it 1,000 times worse. If Damane wanted the woman to channel fire, the woman had no choice but to obey. The captured woman was reduced to a puppet. Luthair watched this, and he saw the future. He saw the way to win his war. He ordered his craftsmen to work with Damane to produce more of these collars and bracelets. They called the device the sul'dam. In the old tongue, this means the leash. The women who were captured and forced to wear the collar were called Damane, which means the leashed ones. The women who wore the bracelet were called sul'dam, which means the leash holders. With the sul'dam in his hands, the tide of the war turned completely. Luthair's forces began to hunt down the native Aes Sedai. Whenever they captured one, They did not execute her. They leashed her. They turned the enemy's greatest weapon against them. The native channelers who had once been the warlords of the continent now found themselves enslaved. They were forced to use their power to destroy their former allies. There is a dark irony in the story of Damane. She believed that she would be honored by Luthair for giving him this weapon. She thought she would sit by his side as a partner. But Luthair had learned his lesson well. He looked at Damane and he saw a woman who could channel. He saw a woman who was dangerous. Once she had served her purpose and taught his people how to make the sul'dam. She too was seized. A collar was snapped around her neck. She became a Damane, just like the rivals she had hated. This established the most important law of the Seanchan Empire, which is that no woman who can channel is above the law. All must be leashed. The war for the continent was long and brutal. It was known as the Consolidation. It did not end in a few years. It did not even end in Luthair's lifetime. Luthair Paendrag died before the entire continent was under his rule, but he left behind a system that was unbreakable. He left behind a military machine that knew only victory. His descendants continued the war. They pushed further and further east and south. It took hundreds of years to fully conquer the continent. It was a war of slow and grinding progress. As the Seanchan armies moved, they brought with them a new kind of order. Luthair's descendants called themselves the emperors and empresses. They claimed they were the rightful rulers of all mankind because they carried the blood of Artur Hawkwing. During the Consolidation, the Seanchan did something that the Westlanders had failed to do. They completely eradicated the shadow spawn from their continent. In the Westlands, the blight still exists in the north, and Trollocs still raid the borderlands. But in Seanchan, the armies of Luthair and his heirs hunted the shadow spawn to extinction. They called them the armies of night. They used the power of the Damane to burn the Trollocs out of every forest and every mountain cave. By the time the Consolidation was finished, the continent was free of the Shadow's beasts. The only monsters left were the ones the Seanchan found useful. They kept the Raken and the Grolm and other exotic beasts. They bred them and trained them. These beasts became a standard part of their military. The Raken were used as scouts and messengers flying high above the battlefield. The Toraken, which were larger cousins of the Raken, were used to carry heavy loads and transport soldiers. The Grolm were used as heavy infantry to break enemy lines. The society that emerged from the Consolidation was rigid and absolute. At the very top sat the Empress. She ruled from the Crystal Throne. The Crystal Throne itself is a terre angreal. It is a massive chair that causes anyone who approaches it to feel an overwhelming sense of awe and submission. It ensures that the ruler is viewed as a figure larger than life. The Seanchan have a saying that the Empress, may she live forever, is the center of the world. Below the Empress are the nobility. They are called the blood. The blood are divided into the high blood and the low blood. You can tell a member of the blood by their appearance. They shave the sides of their heads, leaving a crest of hair down the middle, or sometimes a braid. They grow their fingernails long and lacquer them in bright colors. The number of lacquered nails indicates their rank. A member of the high blood might have all 10 fingernails lacquered. A member of the low blood might have only 2. Commoners in Seanchan society are known as the Dakovale, which translates to those who are property. Slavery is a fundamental part of their culture, but it is not slavery based on race or money in the way we might think of it. Anyone can become property. If a person commits a crime, they might be made Dakovale. If a noble fails the Empress, they might be stripped of their rank and made Dakovale. However, being a slave in Seanchan is not always a life of misery. some Dakavale rise to high positions. The hereditary servants of the imperial family are called Sojin. The Sojin have immense power. A Sojin of the Empress might have the authority to give orders to a member of the High Blood. They are the voice of their masters. In this strange society, a slave can technically outrank a free man depending on who owns them, but the lowest of the low are the Damane. Even though they are powerful and valuable, they are not considered people, they are considered dangerous animals. A Damane is treated like a well-trained dog. She is kept in a kennel or a special room. She is not allowed to have a name of her own. She is given a new name by her sul'dam. She is forbidden to read or write. She is forbidden to speak to anyone other than her sul'dam. The training of a Damane is a process of breaking a human being completely. When a girl is found who can channel, she is taken from her family. There is no choice in the matter. The family is often rewarded with money or status, but they will never see their daughter again. The girl is put in the collar. Immediately, the first thing she learns is pain. If she tries to take the collar off, she gets sick. If she tries to channel without permission, she feels pain. If she refuses an order, she feels pain. Over time, the girl stops resisting. She begins to believe what she is told. She is told that she is a monster. She is told that without the leash, she would go mad and destroy everyone she loves. She is told that the sul'dam is her savior because the sul'dam keeps her safe from herself. This conditioning is so deep that adult Damane will often weep with gratitude if their sul'dam pets them on the head. They become terrified of the idea of freedom. If you were to take the collar off a Damane who has been enslaved for 10 years, she would likely scream and beg you to put it back on because she does not know how to exist without it. The relationship between the Damane and the sul'dam is complex. The sul'dam can feel what the Damane feels through the link. They share emotions. Many sul'dam treat their Damane like beloved pets. They groom them and feed them sweets and speak to them in baby talk. But they never forget that the woman on the end of the leash is a weapon. In battle, the sul'dam directs the flows of the power. The Damane is just the battery and the conduit. For 1,000 years, this system held the Seanchan continent together. While the Westlands were fracturing into smaller nations and forgetting their history, the Seanchan were solidifying theirs. They remembered Artur Hawkwing. They revered him as a god. They believed that Luthair had been sent on a holy mission. But they also remembered where they came from. They knew that across the Aryth Ocean lay the land of their ancestors. They knew that the crystal throne was just a temporary seat. The prophecy and the decree of the Empress stated that one day they would return. This event was called the Corenne, which means the return. The Seanchan believed that the Westlands had been stolen from them. They believed that after Hawkwing died, his empire had been torn apart by traitors and lesser men. They believed it was their solemn duty to go back and reclaim what was theirs. They also believed that the Westlands were living in sin because they allowed women who could channel to run free. They saw the Aes Sedai of the White Tower as loose, rabid animals that needed to be leashed for the safety of the world. So for centuries, they prepared, they built ships, they bred more beasts, they trained more soldiers. They waited for the sign that it was time to launch the Corenne. They sent scouts across the ocean occasionally, but few returned. Those who did brought back tales of a land that was broken and weak. A land where Aes Sedai pulled the strings of kings and queens. This only fueled the Seanchan's desire to invade. They saw themselves not as conquerors but as restorers of order. The structure of the military was designed for this eventual invasion. The Seanchan army is known as the ever-victorious army. It is a mix of infantry and cavalry, and exotic beasts and Damane. They fight with a coordination that the Westlands have not seen since the time of Hawkwing. Every soldier knows his place. Every officer is trained in the history of war. The armor of the Seanchan soldiers looks like the carapace of an insect. It is lacquered and segmented. To a Westlander, it looks alien and frightening. Their helmets often look like the heads of monstrous beetles. When a Seanchan army marches, it looks like a swarm of insects moving across the land. This visual impact is intentional. It is meant to strike fear into the enemy before the first arrow is even loose. The arrival of the Seanchan back in the Westlands was a shock that no one expected. It happened at the town of Falme on the tip of the Toman Head Peninsula. The people of Falme woke up one morning to see the bay filled with strange ships with ribbed sails. They saw men in insect armor marching onto the docks. They saw women with silver leashes being led by other women. And they saw the banner. The banner of the Seanchan is not a new design. It is the banner of Artur Hawkwing. It is the Golden Hawk in flight. To the people of Falme, this was confusing. Hawkwing had been dead for 1,000 years. Who were these people flying his flag? The invasion of Falme was swift. The local garrison stood no chance against the Damane. The Seanchan took the city in a matter of hours. They immediately imposed their law. The people were told that they were now subjects of the Empress. They were told to swear the oaths of obedience. Those who resisted were killed or enslaved. The Seanchan began to send out patrols. They were scouting the land, preparing for the main force. The initial force at Falme was just the Haleen, which means the forerunners. They were the tip of the spear. Their job was to secure a landing zone and gather intelligence. What they found confirmed their worst fears and their highest hopes. They found that the land was indeed full of Marath Damane. This is their word for women who can channel but are not yet leashed. It translates to those who must be leashed. They captured a number of Aes Sedai from the White Tower who happened to be in the area. The capture of these Aes Sedai was a pivotal moment. For the first time in history, Sisters of the White Tower were forced to wear the collar. The psychological impact on them was devastating. These were women who were used to being treated like queens. They were used to people bowing to them and fearing them. Now they were being treated like dogs. They were whipped if they spoke out of turn. They were forced to use the power to blow up trees or rocks just to amuse their new masters. The Seanchan were delighted with these new captures. They found that the Aes Sedai were often stronger in the power than their own domain, but they also found them to be poorly trained in terms of using the power as a weapon. The Aes Sedai knew how to do many things like heal and influence weather, but they had never been trained to kill. The Seanchan sul'dam took great pleasure in breaking them and teaching them how to be weapons. However, the Seanchan at Falme ran into a problem they did not anticipate. They ran into the Dragon Reborn. Rand al'Thor and his friends were drawn to Falme by the weaving of the pattern. The conflict that followed was the first time the Seanchan tasted defeat. The Battle of Falme was chaotic. The heroes of the Horn were summoned from the grave. These were the legendary figures of history, and they fought against the Seanchan. The sight of dead heroes fighting the invaders shook the Seanchan soldiers. They are a very superstitious people. They believe heavily in omens and signs. Seeing the heroes of legend fight against them made some of them question if they were on the right side. Despite their discipline and their domain, the Seanchan were pushed back into the sea. This defeat was a major blow to their pride. But the Seanchan Empire is not easily deterred. The survivors of Falme regrouped. They did not flee back to their home continent. They simply moved down the coast. They realized that they needed more strength before they could take the Westlands. This leads us to the second wave of the invasion. This wave was led by the High Blood. The High Lady Suroth took command. She was a woman of cunning and ruthlessness. She understood that brute force had failed at Falme, so she decided to use a different strategy. She began to infiltrate the chaotic politics of the Westlands. The Seanchan moved south to the nation of Tarabon. Tarabon was already in a state of civil war and anarchy. The people were starving. Bandits roamed the countryside. The government had collapsed. When the Seanchan arrived, they did not just come as conquerors. They came as stabilizers. This is the most complex part of the Seanchan invasion. They are brutal, yes. They enslave people, yes. But they also bring order. When they took Tarabon, they wiped out the bandits. They opened the food stores and fed the hungry. They established patrols to keep the roads safe. For the average peasant who just wanted to farm his land and feed his children, the Seanchan were actually an improvement over the previous rulers. The Seanchan demand absolute obedience, but in exchange they provide absolute protection. A commoner in a Seanchan-controlled city can walk down the street at night with a bag of gold and not fear being robbed, because the punishment for robbery is so severe that no one dares to do it. This created a strange situation where the common people of Tarabon and later Amaditia began to accept Seanchan rule. They did not like the slavery or the weird customs, but they liked having full bellies and safe homes. The invasion force continued to grow. They captured the fortress of the White Cloaks. The Children of the Light, who hated Aes Sedai, found themselves in a difficult position. They hated the witches, but they also hated the invaders. Many White Cloaks were killed or enslaved. The Seanchan saw the White Cloaks as a nuisance. They did not care about the White Cloaks' philosophy. They only cared that the White Cloaks refused to bow to the Crystal Throne. The next major target was the city of Ebu Dar in Altara. This was a strategic jewel. The conquest of Ebu Dar was a masterpiece of military planning. The Seanchan used their Raken to drop soldiers behind the city walls at night. They used their Damane to blast the gates open from the inside. The city fell in a single night, with very little loss of civilian life. Once they held Ebu Dar, the Seanchan began to dig in. They were there to stay. They began to scour the countryside for women who could channel. In Ebu Dar, they found the Kin. The Kin were a secret society of women who had been put out of the White Tower or who had run away. There were thousands of them hiding in plain sight. The Seanchan had a field day. They captured hundreds of these women and collared them. The number of Damane in the Seanchan army swelled. This brings us to the core conflict of ideologies. To the Westlanders, the Seanchan are monsters. They strip women of their humanity. They demand that kings and queens bow down and kiss the floor. They are alien and terrifying, but to the Seanchan, the Westlanders are the monsters. The Seanchan look at the Westlands and they see a world gone mad. They see channelers manipulating kings. They see nations constantly at war. They see the shadow gaining strength. The Seanchan believe that they are the only ones who can save the world for the last battle. They know the prophecies of the dragon just like the Westlanders do, but their interpretation is different. They believe that the dragon reborn must be brought to the Crystal Throne. They believe he must be leashed or controlled so that he can be used as a weapon against the Dark One. They cannot conceive of a man with that much power being allowed to run free. This fundamental misunderstanding drives much of the conflict. The Seanchan are not servants of the Dark One. In fact, they hate the Dark One, perhaps more than the Westlanders do. They have spent 1,000 years purifying their own continent, but their methods are so abhorrent to the free people of the Westlands that alliance seems impossible. The structure of the Seanchan occupation is also worth noting. When they conquer a territory, they leave the local rulers in place if possible. They simply place a Seanchan overseer above them. They allow the locals to keep their customs as long as those customs do not conflict with imperial law. But the one thing they never compromise on is the domain. Every village is searched, every girl is tested. If a girl has the spark, she is taken. There are no exceptions. The testing is done once a year. All girls of a certain age are gathered in the village square. A domain is brought in. She can feel the resonance of another woman who can channel. If she points to a girl, that girl's life as a free human is over. The crying of the mothers and the screaming of the girls is ignored. To the Seanchan soldiers, this is not cruelty. It is safety. It is like removing a live bomb from a playground. They genuinely believe they are doing the right thing. As the Seanchan presence in the Westlands grew, so did the tension within their own ranks. The High Lady Suroth, who was leading the invasion, had her own secrets. But the arrival of the Daughter of the Nine Moons changed everything. TWOT is the heir to the Crystal Throne. She is a woman of small stature but immense presence. She came to the Westlands to inspect the Corenne. TWOT represents the perfect Seanchan. She is disciplined, utterly loyal to the Empire, and believes completely in the system. She views the domain as pets. She is a sul'dam herself, and she is very good at it. Her arrival signaled that the Empire was no longer just raiding. The heir was here. The full weight of the Crystal Throne was now behind the invasion. TWOT's interactions with the people of the Westlands provide a fascinating look into the Seanchan mind. She cannot understand why the Westlanders resist. She looks at their chaotic cities and their squabbling kings, and she feels pity for them. She genuinely wants to bring them under the protection of the Empire. When she meets Mat Cawthon, she is confused by his lack of respect, but also intrigued by his strange luck and skill. The Seanchan also brought with them their own prophecies. They have the Asanic cycle. It speaks of the dragon, but it calls him by other names. It says that the Empire will bind the world together. This religious belief gives the common soldier a sense of purpose. They are not just fighting for land, they are fighting for the salvation of the universe. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Seanchan invasion is how effective the sul'dam is on the Westland Aes Sedai. We see powerful women like Eleda's emissaries captured and broken. The speed at which they are broken varies. Some resist for weeks, some break in days, but they all break eventually. The sul'dam creates a physical and psychological dependency. The pleasure of the one power becomes linked to the obedience to the sul'dam. This creates a terrifying possibility for the future of the Westlands. If the Seanchan win, there will be no more Aes Sedai, there will be no more White Tower, there will only be Damane. The culture of 3,000 years would be erased. The knowledge of the ages that the Aes Sedai hold would be twisted to serve the Empire. But the Seanchan also have a weakness. It is a secret that could destroy their entire society. It is the secret of the sul'dam. For 1,000 years they have believed that sul'dam are different from Damane. They believe Damane are women who have the spark, and sul'dam are women who have an affinity for command. They do not realize that sul'dam are simply women who can learn to channel. In the Westlands we know that there are two types of channelers, those who are born with the spark and will channel eventually no matter what, and those who can be taught but will not channel spontaneously. In Seanchan, the women with the spark are the domain, the women who can be taught are the sul'dam. This means that every single sul'dam, every noblewoman who holds a leash, is technically a Marath Damane herself. If the populace knew this, the entire social order would collapse. The Empress herself might be capable of learning to channel. The foundation of their society is based on a lie. They enslave women for having the same potential that the slave masters possess. This hypocrisy is the ticking time bomb at the heart of the Empire. As they spend more time in the Westlands, this secret becomes harder to keep. The Aes Sedai can sense the ability in the sul'dam. When an Aes Sedai looks at a sul'dam, she sees a woman who could be a novice in the White Tower. The Seanchan dismiss this as a lie of the witches, but deep down, some of the high blood are beginning to wonder. The conquest of the Westlands is not just a military campaign for the Seanchan. It is a collision of worlds. It is a test of whether freedom with all its chaos is better than slavery with all its order. The Seanchan are the mirror image of the Westlands. They show us what the world might have looked like if Hawkwing had never died, and if the Aes Sedai had been defeated. As we move deeper into the lore of the Seanchan in the next chapter, we will look at the specific battles and the politics of the return. But for now, we must understand the sheer scale of what they have achieved. They have tamed a continent, they have erased the shadow, and they have built a machine of war that threatens to consume the world. The Consolidation was the forging of the hammer, the Corenne is the swing of that hammer, and the Westlands are the anvil. The question is whether the anvil will break or if the hammer will shatter. The Seanchan are not evil in their own eyes. They are the heroes of their own story, and that makes them all the more dangerous. This concludes Chapter 1 of our deep dive into the Seanchan Empire. We have covered the origins, the culture, and the initial return. In the next part, we will explore the detailed mechanics of the domain training, the secret history of the sul'dam, and the major battles that defined their campaign in the Westlands. Thank you for listening, and sleep well. Part 2, The Crystal Throne. To truly understand the threat that the Seanchan Empire poses to the world, we must understand the society that built it. It is not just an army, it is a way of life that is completely alien to the people of the Westlands. At the center of this way of life sits the Crystal Throne. The throne is located in the city of Xiandar, which is the capital of the Seanchan Empire. The city itself is a marvel of architecture and order, but the throne is the heart. The Crystal Throne is not just a chair made of fancy glass. It is a powerful ter'angreal from the Age of Legends. We do not know exactly what it was used for in the old days, but we know what it does now. Anyone who approaches the Crystal Throne feels an overwhelming sense of awe. It is a physical sensation. It makes the person sitting on it seem majestic and terrible and wonderful all at the same time. It forces the viewer to want to obey. This is why the rule of the Empress is so absolute. It is not just law, it is magic. When a person stands before the Empress, they are physically compelled to feel that she is the greatest being in the universe. This ensures that rebellions are very rare, because to rebel against the Empress feels like rebelling against a god. The person who sits on the throne is known as the Empress. May she live forever. This phrase, may she live forever, is not just a politeness. It is spoken every single time her title is mentioned. If you say the Empress without adding may she live forever, you can be punished or even executed for disrespect. The Empress has absolute power over life and death. She can order a noble of the high blood to commit suicide, and they will do it immediately and thank her for the honor. This is a level of control that the kings and queens of the Westlands cannot even imagine. Below the Empress is the nobility known as the Blood. The Blood are the ruling class of the Empire. They are the descendants of Luthair Paendrag and his generals. They are divided into two ranks, which are the High Blood and the Low Blood. You can spot a member of the Blood from a mile away because of the way they look. The most obvious sign is their hair. The Seanchan nobility shave their heads in very specific ways. A man of the low blood might shave everything except a long braid down the back. A woman of the high blood might shave the sides of her head and leave a crest of hair in the middle. This shaving is shocking to the Westlanders who view baldness as a sign of age or sickness, but in Seanchan it is the height of fashion and power. The other sign of the blood is the fingernails. This is perhaps the most famous visual of the Seanchan. The members of the blood let their fingernails grow very long. They lacquer them with bright colours. The number of lacquered nails tells you their rank. A person with one lacquered fingernail is a minor noble. A person with all 10 fingernails lacquered and painted is of the highest rank. The high blood are the governors and the generals. They rule over the massive territories of the Seanchan continent. They are constantly plotting against one another. The game of politics in Shondar is deadly. Assassination is common. It is actually legal in a way as long as you do not get caught, and as long as you do not harm the empire itself. The Empress encourages this infighting because it weeds out the weak. She wants her servants to be strong and cunning. If a member of the high blood is killed by a rival, it simply means they were not smart enough to survive. However, there is a group that even the high blood fears. They are called the Seekers for Truth. The Seekers are the secret police of the Empire. They answer only to the Empress. A Seeker can walk into the home of a High Lord and arrest him without a warrant. They are trained in torture and interrogation. Their symbol is a raven and a tower. When a Seeker arrives at your door, it usually means your life is over. They are looking for dark friends and traitors, but they also police the behavior of the nobility. They ensure that no one gets too powerful to challenge the Crystal Throne. Another unique aspect of the Seanchan military and society is the Death Watch Guard. These are the elite soldiers of the Empress. They are the bodyguards and the shock troops. What makes them unique is that they are made up of two groups, humans and Ogier. In the Westlands, the Ogier are peaceful builders who rarely fight. They live in steading and stay out of human wars. But in Seanchan, the Ogier are different. They are called the Gardeners. The Seanchan Ogier are fierce warriors. They wear massive armor and carry giant axes and hammers. They are absolutely loyal to the Empress. The reason for this loyalty goes back to the Consolidation. When Luthair arrived, the Ogier of that continent were being hunted by shadow spawn. Luthair's armies saved them. The Ogier swore an oath of eternal service to the Empire for saving their race. The Death Watch Guards, whether human or Ogier, are considered property of the Empress. They are not free men. They live to serve and die for the throne. This brings us to the concept of slavery in Seanchan, which is called Darkavale. The word means those who are property. In the Westlands, slavery is illegal and seen as evil. In Seanchan, it is the foundation of the economy and the social structure. But it is a very strange kind of slavery. It has nothing to do with skin color or where you were born. Anyone can become Darkavale. A High Lord who fails a mission can be stripped of his rank and made a slave. A commoner who commits a crime becomes a slave. But here is the twist. Darkavale are often treated with great respect. If you are the property of a high lady, you are better fed and better clothed than a free farmer. You have status. Darkavale is to damage the property of a noble, which is a serious crime. The highest rank of slave is the Sojin. These are the hereditary upper servants. They are born into service to the great families. A Sojin is not just a servant, they are the right hand of their master. The Sojin of the Empress has more political power than most kings. If the Empress's Sojin gives an order to a general, the general obeys. The Sojin shave their heads completely smooth. They wear beautiful silk clothing. They are trained in administration and combat. It is said that a Sojin of the blood would rather die than be set free. To them, freedom is a punishment. It means being cast out of the family they serve. This social structure is held together by the concept of honor. The Seanchan call it the look of the eyeless. This refers to doing your duty even when no one is watching. It is a rigid code. If a person breaks their word or fails in a major duty, they lose face. Often the only way to restore honor is suicide. This makes the Seanchan very predictable but also very reliable. If a Seanchan gives you his word, he will keep it or die trying. Now we must move to the darkest and most crucial part of Seanchan society. This is the part that terrifies the Westlands the most. It is the system of the Damane. As we discussed in the first part, Damane means leashed one. These are women who can channel the one power. In the Seanchan view, these women are not human. They are animals, dangerous animals that must be controlled. The Seanchan believe that a woman who can channel will eventually go mad or become a tyrant if she is not leashed. They look at the history of their own continent before the Consolidation, and they see proof of this. They see the chaos of the Westlands caused by Aes Sedai, and they see more proof. The life of a Damane is a tragedy of the highest order. It begins when a girl is discovered. The Seanchan test every girl annually. When a girl is found to have the spark, she is taken immediately. She is given a name. This is an important part of the breaking process. Her old name is forbidden. She is given a pet name, usually something cute or diminutive, like Pura or Miri. This reinforces the idea that she is no longer a person. The instrument of their slavery is the sul'dam. This device is a terangriel that creates a forced link between two women. The collar goes around the Damane's neck. It has no lock. It closes seamlessly and cannot be removed by physical force. It cannot be cut. It cannot be broken. The only way to open it is for the woman wearing the bracelet to wish it open. The link created by the sul'dam is a one-way street of control. The woman wearing the bracelet is the sul'dam, which means leash holder. Through the link, the sul'dam can feel the emotions of the Damane. She can feel her physical sensations. If the Damane is hungry, the sul'dam feels a shadow of that hunger. If the Damane is angry, the sul'dam feels it. But the control is absolute. If the Damane tries to touch the one power without permission, she is struck by nausea and pain. If she tries to move the bracelet, she feels pain. If she even thinks about hurting her sul'dam, the collar reacts and paralyzes her with agony. The sul'dam is a perfect prison. It turns the prisoner's own mind and body against them. The training of a Damane is designed to make her love her slavery. This is the most disturbing part. The sul'dam does not just beat the Damane, she acts like a mother or a strict owner. When the Damane obeys, she is praised. She is petted on the head. She is given sweets. She is told, "Good girl." When she disobeys, she is punished, but the sul'dam often acts like she is sad to do it. She says, "You made me hurt you," or "Why must you be so bad?" Over months and years, this breaks the mind of the Damane. She becomes like a dog that loves its master, even if the master kicks it. We see this in the books with the character of Olivia and others. Even after hundreds of years of slavery, they are terrified of being free. They believe they are monsters. They believe the collar is the only thing keeping them sane. The Damane are used for everything. In the Westlands, the Aes Sedai use the power for healing and weather and gentle tasks. In Seanchan, the Damane are tools of industry and war. They are used to find ores in the ground. They are used to blast roadways through mountains. And most importantly, they are used in battle. In combat, a Damane is a mobile artillery unit. The sul'dam stands behind her and directs her. The sul'dam does not channel herself, but she can see what the Damane sees through the link. She points out a target and orders the Damane to destroy it. The Damane weaves the flows of fire and earth and blasts the enemy apart. The Seanchan have developed weaves that the Aes Sedai do not know. They have weaves for ripping the earth apart. They have weaves for creating lightning storms that can wipe out a regiment. The efficiency of this system is terrifying. An Aes Sedai requires concentration and calm. A Damane is a weapon that can be fired on command. Because they are forced, they can be pushed to the point of exhaustion. A sul'dam can force a Damane to channel until she passes out or dies. They are expendable ammunition. However, there is a deep secret at the heart of this system. It is a secret that the Empire protects with lethal force. It concerns the nature of the sul'dam. In the Seanchan worldview, there are two types of women related to the power. There are those who have the spark born in them. These women will channel eventually no matter what. If they are not taught, they might die or destroy things. These are the Damane. Then there are the sul'dam. The Seanchan believe that sul'dam are special women who have the ability to control the Damane but cannot channel themselves. They believe it is a different talent entirely. This is a lie. It is a lie that they tell themselves to sleep at night. The truth is that sul'dam are simply women who have the ability to learn to channel. In the Westlands, we know that some women are born with the spark and others can be taught. The sul'dam are the ones who can be taught. This means that every single sul'dam is technically a Marath Damane. They are exactly the same as the women they enslave. The only difference is that the Damane have the spark and the sul'dam do not. If a sul'dam were to be trained, she could channel just like a Damane. The sul'dam works because it requires a channeler at both ends. The woman in the bracelet must be able to channel to complete the circuit. The Seanchan ignore this fact. They refuse to believe it. But the evidence is there. Sul'dam can see the weaves of the power when they are linked. Over time, many sul'dam begin to be able to see the weaves even when they are not linked. This is a sign that they are slowly learning to channel just by being exposed to it. If this secret were to be revealed widely, it would destroy the Empire. The Empress herself is likely a woman who could learn to channel. The High Blood are full of women who could learn. The entire justification for their society is that channelers are subhuman monsters who must be controlled by normal humans. If the normal humans are also channelers, then the whole system is hypocrisy. It is slavery for the sake of power, not for the sake of safety. This secret is known to a very few at the top, and they kill anyone who discovers it. When the Seanchan came to the Westlands, this secret was threatened. The Aes Sedai can sense the potential in other women. When an Aes Sedai looks at a sul'dam, she feels the ability there. The Seanchan dismiss this as a lie of the witches, but deep down the fear is there. Let us transition from the women of power to the beasts of power. The Seanchan military is not just men and Damane, it is a zoo of nightmares. When Luthair conquered the continent, he adopted the native beasts. These creatures come from other worlds. They were brought to the world of the Wheel of Time via portal stones during the Age of Legends, or perhaps even earlier. They are not shadow spawn. They are animals, but they are alien. The most famous of these is the Raken. A Raken is a flying reptile. It is similar to a dragon or a wyvern, but without the fire breath. It has leathery wings and a long neck. It is about the size of a horse. The Seanchan use them as the eyes of the army. Raken flyers are an elite corps. They are scouts. They fly high above the battlefield and use spyglasses to spot enemy movements. They are fast and agile. To the Westlanders who have never seen a flying machine or a flying beast, the sight of a Raken is terrifying. It means the enemy can see everything. Then there is the To'Raken. This is the larger cousin of the Raken. It is massive. It can carry heavy cargo or multiple passengers. The Seanchan use them for transport. They can drop soldiers behind enemy lines. They can carry supplies over mountains. They are the heavy lift aircraft of the ancient world. On the ground, the Seanchan use the grolm. A grolm is a predator. It is the size of a bear, but it has a texture like a frog. It has 3 eyes. It is extremely hard to kill. The Seanchan use them as shock troops. They release them into enemy ranks to cause panic. A grolm can bite through armor. It is intelligent enough to be trained, but savage enough to be terrifying. There are other beasts as well. The Corenne are fast-running predators that look like flightless birds or raptors. They are used for tracking and scouting in dense terrain. The Lopar are large, hairless beasts that are used as bodyguards. They are incredibly strong and loyal. The Seanchan have a beast for every purpose. They view these animals as tools, just like they view the Damane. The presence of these beasts changes the way war is fought. In the Westlands, armies line up and charge. But you cannot simply charge a Seanchan line. If you do, the Raken will spot you miles away. The Damane will bombard you from a distance, and when you get close, the grolm will tear your horses apart. This combined arms approach is why the Seanchan are the ever-victorious army. They do not fight fair, they fight to win. But the Empire is not just about war and slavery. There is a culture of art and beauty as well. The Seanchan appreciate poetry and flowers. They have elaborate ceremonies for tea and for greeting. They are a civilized people in their own eyes. They look at the Westlanders who yell and spit and have messy politics, and they see barbarians. The Seanchan commoner believes that the Empire is the greatest thing in the world. They believe that the Empress watches over them. They have a system of justice that is swift and brutal, but fair. If a noble kills a peasant without cause, the noble is punished. The law applies to everyone except the Empress. This creates a sense of security. However, this security comes at the cost of freedom. In Seanchan you are told what to be. If your father was a soldier, you are a soldier. If your mother was a baker, you are a baker. There is very little social mobility unless you join the military or the bureaucracy and prove yourself exceptional. And even then you are always property of the state. The clash between the Seanchan culture and the Westland culture is one of the main themes of the story. The Westlanders value individualism. They value the freedom to make mistakes. The Seanchan value the collective. They value the perfection of the state. When the Seanchan occupy a city like Abu Dar, they do not burn it down. They clean it up. They pave the streets. They stop the duels. They lower the taxes for the poor. And the people love them for it at first. It is only later, when they see their daughters being leashed or their neighbors disappearing into the night, that the horror sets in. This duality is what makes them such compelling villains. They are not like the Trollocs who just want to eat you. The Seanchan want to own you. They want to fix you. They truly believe that your life would be better if you just put on the collar or bowed to the throne. We must also talk about the specific prophecy that drives them. The cycle of the dragon is known in the Westlands, but the Seanchan have their own version. They believe the dragon reborn will kneel before the crystal throne. They believe that the Empress will lead the armies of light against the Dark One with the dragon as her general. This is why they are hunting Rand al'Thor. They do not want to kill him. They want to capture him. They want to put a collar on him if possible, or at least force him to swear the oaths. Imagine the arrogance of this. The dragon reborn is a force of nature. He is the most powerful channeler in existence, and the Seanchan believe they can make him a pet. This shows the depth of their belief in their own system. They cannot conceive of a power that cannot be broken by the sul'dam and the crystal throne. In the next chapter we will see what happens when this immovable object meets the unstoppable force of the dragon reborn. We will dive into the specific battles of the return. We will look at the campaign in Altara, the kidnapping of the Daughter of the Nine Moons, and the final confrontation that determines the fate of the world. But for now, let us rest on the image of the Crystal Throne, a beautiful, terrible seat of power that commands a continent, a place where honor is everything and freedom is nothing, a place where women are weapons and monsters are pets. This is the Seanchan Empire. This concludes part 2 of our series. We have explored the depths of their society and the secrets of their power. In the final part, we will witness the war for the Westlands and the conclusion of their epic journey. Sleep well, and may you never feel the weight of the collar. Part 3, the Corenne. We have spoken of the history and we have spoken of the culture. Now we must speak of the event that shook the world. The Seanchan call it the Corenne, which means the return. To the people of the Westlands, it was not a return, it was an invasion. It was the moment when the maps had to be redrawn, and the kings and queens realized they were no longer the biggest fish in the pond. This part of the story is about the clash of two civilizations that had been separated for 1,000 years. It is about the war that almost destroyed the world before the last battle could even begin. The return did not happen all at once. It began with the forerunners at Falme, as we discussed, but after the defeat at Falme, the Seanchan did not go home. They are a people who do not know how to give up. To give up is to lose honor. To lose honor is worse than death. So they regrouped. They waited for the main fleet. When the main fleet arrived, it was like a tidal wave hitting the coast. The true invasion began in the region of Tarabon. Tarabon was a nation known for its veils and its dyes and its fireworks, but it was also a nation in ruin. It was torn apart by civil war and by the Dragon's Warn. The people were starving in the streets. When the Seanchan ships arrived in the harbours of Tanchico, the capital of Tarabon, they did not encounter a unified resistance. They found a broken country. The High Lady Suroth was in command of this initial push. She was a woman of the high blood who hid a dark secret, but to her soldiers, she was the voice of the Empress. She ordered the legions to march. The Seanchan army moved into Tarabon like a machine. They secured the ports first. Then they moved to the cities. They did not just fight the armies of the king of Tarabon, they fought the mobs. They fought the bandits. Within a very short time, the king of Tarabon was sitting on his throne, but he was no longer a king. He was a vassal. He had sworn the oaths. The Seanchan allowed him to keep his title, but a Seanchan official stood behind him at all times. The change in Tarabon was immediate. The fighting in the streets stopped because the Seanchan killed anyone who fought. The starvation stopped because the Seanchan opened the granaries and distributed food. This is the seductive nature of the empire. The people of Tarabon had been living in fear for years. Suddenly there were soldiers in insect armor on every corner. If you dropped a coin on the street, a soldier would pick it up and give it back to you. If a bandit tried to rob you, a grolm would eat him. For the average washerwoman or farmer, life got better. They did not care about the high politics, or the fact that the Aes Sedai were being chained. They cared that their children were eating. From Tarabon, the empire expanded into Amaditsia. This was the home of the Children of the Light, also known as the White Cloaks. The White Cloaks were religious zealots who hated Aes Sedai and Dark Friends. They believed they were the only true soldiers of the light. They had a massive fortress called the Dome of Truth. They were proud and arrogant. The Seanchan crushed them. The battle for Amaditsia was barely a battle. The White Cloaks relied on heavy cavalry charges. The Seanchan used Damane. They blasted the ground in front of the charging horses. They used Raken to spot the White Cloak ambushes. The fortress of the light was taken. The Lord Captain Commander of the White Cloaks was forced to surrender. This was a massive shock to the world. The White Cloaks had been a power for centuries. Now they were scattered or enslaved. The Seanchan did not care about the White Cloak philosophy. To the Seanchan, the White Cloaks were just a nuisance. They were men who did not know their place. The Seanchan put their own laws in place. They told the White Cloaks they could continue to exist if they obeyed the Empire. Many White Cloaks refused and died. Some accepted and became auxiliary troops. But the biggest prize was the city of Ebu Dar. Ebu Dar was the capital of Altara. It was a major port city. It was the gateway to the south. The conquest of Ebu Dar was a masterpiece of strategy. The Seanchan did not want to destroy the city. They wanted to use it. They launched a night attack. They used the Raken to fly soldiers over the walls. They seized the harbour and the palace before the sun came up. The queen of Altara was a woman named Tylin. She was smart and pragmatic. She saw the Seanchan army and she saw the Damane. She knew that if she fought, her city would burn and her people would die. So she surrendered. She kept her crown, but she signed the treaties. She became a vassal of the Crystal Throne. The occupation of Ebu Dar gives us the best look at what Seanchan rule is really like. The city changed overnight. The streets were cleaned. The Seanchan have a thing about cleanliness. They believe that a dirty city is a sign of a dirty mind. They forced the locals to clean up the trash. They set up soup kitchens, but they also set up the kennels for the Damane. The Seanchan found a treasure trove in Ebu Dar. They found the kin. The kin were a group of women who had been kicked out of the White Tower or had run away. They were hiding in plain sight in Ebu Dar. There were nearly 2,000 of them. The Seanchan could not believe their luck. They rounded them up. Women who had been grandmothers and healers were suddenly thrown into collars. The Seanchan also captured the Aes Sedai who were in the city using the Bowl of the Winds. And this was a major blow to the White Tower, but to the Seanchan it was just a harvest. They call the capturing of channelers harvesting. They view it like picking fruit. It is a resource to be gathered. It was into this occupied city that the most important figure of the return arrived. Her name was Tuon Athem Kore Paendrag. She was the daughter of the 9 moons. She was the favourite daughter of the Empress and the heir to the Crystal Throne. She was a tiny woman. She was barely 5 feet tall. She had no hair and was dark of skin. But when she walked into a room, generals who had conquered nations would tremble. Tuon is the embodiment of the Empire. She is not for the sake of being cruel. She is because she believes it is necessary. She came to the Westlands to inspect the invasion. She found that the High Lady Suroth was acting suspiciously. Tuon is a master of politics. She can read a person's face like a book. She saw that Suroth was hiding something. Then fate intervened. Tuon encountered Mat Cawthon. Mat is one of the 3 main heroes of the story. He is a gambler and a general. He had been prophesied to marry the daughter of the 9 moons. When he saw her, he didn't know who she was. He just saw a small, rich woman. Through a series of chaotic events involving the Shadow and the Seanchan internal politics, Mat ended up kidnapping Tuon. He didn't mean to kidnap the heir to the Empire. He just wanted to get out of the city, and she happened to be in the way. But once he had her, he couldn't let her go. This journey they took together is crucial for understanding the Seanchan. Through Tuon's eyes, we see how strange the Westlands look to them. Tuon watched Mat. She watched him command his soldiers. She watched him treat his men with respect. She watched him fight. She began to see that the Westlanders were not just barbarians. She saw that they had honor too, but she could never get over the issue of the Damane. She saw the Aes Sedai in Mat's camp walking around free, and it made her physically sick. To her, it was like seeing a tiger walking around a nursery. There is a moment where Tuon reveals the depth of her training She is a sul'dam. She can control the domain. She enjoys it. She believes it is her right. But during her time with Mat, she learns the secret. She learns that she herself can be taught to channel. This realization shakes her. If the Empress found out that Tuon could channel, Tuon would be collared. She would become a slave. She pushes this knowledge down deep. She refuses to accept it, but it is always there like a crack in a glass. While Tuon was away, the Empire in the Westlands was in turmoil. The High Lady Suroth was a dark friend. She wanted to kill Tuon and take power for herself. She was working with Semirhage, one of the Forsaken. Semirhage had infiltrated the Seanchan court. She had actually murdered the Empress back in Seondar. This meant that Tuon was no longer just the heir. She was the Empress, but she didn't know it yet. The conflict came to a head when Mat's army fought the Seanchan army sent to kill Tuon. Mat used his brilliance to defeat them. Tuon watched him destroy her own people, and she fell in love with him. It is a strange love. She calls him Toy. She treats him like a favorite pet, but she also respects him. She completed the marriage ceremony. Mat Cawthon became the Prince of the Ravens. He became a noble of the Seanchan Empire. When Tuon returned to Abu Dar, she took command. She purged the traitors. Suroth was made Darkovale. The efficiency of Tuon's takeover was brutal. She had the traitors arrested and stripped of their rank within an hour of her return. She declared herself Empress Fortuona. The name means fortune. Under Fortuona, the Seanchan changed their focus. They were no longer just expanding, they were preparing for the last battle. But they still had one major target, the White Tower. The raid on the White Tower is one of the most cinematic moments in the history of the Seanchan. They knew that the White Tower was the center of the witches. They wanted to break it. They launched a massive air raid. Hundreds of Rakan and Torakan flew from the coast to Tar Valon. They carried sul'dam and Damane. They carried blood knives, which are elite assassins with Ter Angrael rings that give them speed and strength, but kill them slowly. The attack was a surprise. The Aes Sedai were fighting among themselves. They looked up and saw the sky filled with leathery wings. The Seanchan descended on the tower. The domain blasted the walls. The soldiers dropped into the hallways. They were not there to conquer the city. They were there to capture women. The fighting in the hallways was vicious. The Seanchan used catchpoles to grab the Aes Sedai by the neck. Once the collar was on, the fight was over. An Aes Sedai who is collared cannot channel to defend herself. The Seanchan captured dozens of sisters. They even captured Elida, who was the Amirlin's seat. Elida was the leader of the White Tower. She was a woman of immense pride and arrogance. The Seanchan took her. They put a collar on her. They renamed her Sufa. They took her back to Abu Dar and made her serve drinks. They made her use her power to create pretty lights for parties. The humiliation was total. This showed the world that no one was safe. If the Amirlin's seat could be made a slave, then anyone could. However, the raid also woke the White Tower up. Egwene Alvear, who was the true Amirlin, led the defense. She stood on the top of the tower and blasted the Rakan out of the sky. The Seanchan took heavy losses. They realized that the Marathadaman were not as weak as they thought. As the last battle approached, the tension between the Dragon Reborn and the Seanchan became the most dangerous thing in the world. Rand al'Thor needed the Seanchan armies. They were the only military force that could match the Shadow, but he could not accept their slavery. He could not bow to the Crystal Throne. There was a meeting. It is a scene of incredible tension. The Dragon Reborn met the Empress Fortuona. They stood in a garden. Rand had the power to destroy the world. Fortuona had the power of an empire behind her. She demanded he kneel. She genuinely believed that he was a subject of the throne. She believed her prophecy said he must serve her. Rand refused. He saw the aura of the light around her, but he also saw the darkness of the collars. They almost came to blows. The fate of the world hung on a knife edge. If they fought each other, the Dark One would win. It was Mat Cauthon who helped bridge the gap. He was the husband of the Empress and the friend of the dragon. He managed to keep lines of communication open. Eventually Rand and Fortuona met again. This time Rand came with a proposal. He offered them the dragon's peace. The treaty was complex. Rand agreed to let the Seanchan keep the lands they had conquered. They could keep Tarabon and Amadisia and Altara. In exchange, they had to sign the peace treaty. They had to agree to fight in the last battle. And most importantly, they had to agree not to expand further. The issue of the domain was the sticking point. Rand wanted them to free the slaves. Fortuona refused. She would rather let the world burn than give up the sul'dam. It was the foundation of her society. In the end, they reached a compromise that was bitter for everyone. The Seanchan could keep the domain they had, but they could not take any more from the lands they did not control. They could not hunt in the Westlands anymore. The Aes Sedai hated this. The Wise Ones hated this. But it was necessary for survival. So the armies of the Seanchan marched to the field of Merilor. This was the site of the last battle. The Seanchan brought everything. They brought the Raken and the Grom. They brought the legions. They brought the domain. During the last battle, the Seanchan were assigned to the command of Mat Cauthon. It is fitting that the gambler led the Empire of Order. The Seanchan soldiers respected Mat. They saw his luck and his skill. They called him the Prince of the Ravens. He led them into the meat grinder. The Seanchan fought the Trollocs with a discipline that was awe-inspiring. They held the flanks. The domain burned the shadow spawn by the thousands. The Raken fought the Drakkar in the sky. The Deathwatch Guard stood their ground against the Midral. Without the Seanchan, the forces of light would have been overrun in the first hour. There was a moment of treachery where the Seanchan withdrew from the battle. It seemed like they had betrayed the light, but it was a feign. It was a tactical maneuver orchestrated by Mat. They returned at the critical moment to smash the Shadow's armies, but the cost was high. Thousands of Seanchan died. Many domain were killed. The Empress herself was in the thick of the command tent coordinating the slaughter. She saw the true face of the Shadow. She saw that the last battle was not just a story. When the dust settled and the Dark One was sealed away, the world had changed. The Seanchan were no longer invaders. They were residents. They owned a huge chunk of the Westlands. They were a superpower. The legacy of the Seanchan is complicated. They are the villains who saved the world. They are the slavers who brought peace. The future of the Westlands after the books is a future of Cold War. The Dragon's Peace prevents open war, but the ideological conflict remains. The Seanchan still hold the domain. They still believe that channelers must be leashed, but now they live next door to the Black Tower and the White Tower. The secret that sul'dam can channel is spreading. Mat knows it. Rand knew it. The Aes Sedai know it. It is a crack in the foundation that will eventually bring the whole house down. But that is a story for the Fourth Age. As we look back on the story of the Seanchan, we see a reflection of humanity's desire for control. The world is a scary place. The one power is a scary thing. The Seanchan answer to fear is control. They control everyone. They control everything. It makes them feel safe. But the story of the Wheel of Time tells us that life is not about control. It is about balance. The The Seanchan are the metal cage. The Westlanders are the wild wind. Both are necessary in some way, but neither can exist without the other. The Seanchan brought order to chaos, but they lost their humanity in the process. The Westlanders kept their humanity, but nearly destroyed themselves with chaos. The return of the Seanchan was a tragedy and a triumph. It reminded the world of what Artur Hawkwing had built and what had been lost. It showed that even the most alien culture is still human underneath the armor. The soldiers of the Empire cry when they lose their friends. The sul'dam weep when their Damane die. They are people trapped in a system of their own making. And so the crystal throne remains. The Empress Fortuona rules over her lands. The ravens fly, the sul'dam snaps shut, the wheel turns, the Seanchan are here to stay. They are the wolves of the sea who came home, and the Westlands will never be the same again. This brings us to the end of our journey into the lore of the Seanchan Empire. We have travelled from the Consolidation to the last battle. We have seen the horrors of the Damane and the glories of the ever-victorious army. I hope this deep dive has helped you understand this complex and terrifying faction. Thank you for listening to this episode of Sleep to Lore. If you are still awake, please remember to subscribe and leave a comment. And if you are asleep, may your dreams be free of leashes and full of light. Good night.